The homeless girl they whispered about just bought the town's most cursed mansion for $275, and what she found hidden in its walls would expose the most powerful man in the county and make her richer than anyone ever imagined. Before we dive into the story, make sure to smash subscribe because tomorrow we have an extra special story for you that will blow your mind. The morning frost clung to the windshield of the battered Honda Civic like it was trying to seal Maya Chen inside. She woke with a start, her breath visible in the freezing air, her neck cramped from sleeping, curled around the steering wheel. The parking lot of the 24-hour gym was nearly empty. It was 5:30 in the morning, and the sky over Thornwick was still that deep purple that comes just before dawn breaks. Maya was 19 years old, but her eyes carried the weight of someone who had lived twice that long. Her dark hair was pulled back in a messy bun, and her clothes, layered for warmth, smelled faintly of the laundromat soap she used every 3 days. She wiped the condensation from the inside of the window with her sleeve and stared at the building in front of her. The gym, her lifeline. For $39 a month, she had access to hot showers, a place to charge her phone, and a bathroom where she could brush her teeth without anyone looking at her with pity or disgust. She grabbed her backpack from the passenger seat. Everything she owned was in there. 2 changes of clothes, a toiletry bag, a worn copy of a home repair manual her foster father had given her when she was 12, a flashlight, $43 in cash, and a protein bar she was saving for later. The gym attendant, a college kid named Trevor, barely looked up when she swiped her membership card. He knew. Everyone knew. But he never said anything, and for that, Maya was grateful. She moved quickly through the locker room, showered in under 5 minutes, changed into her cleanest pair of jeans and a flannel shirt, and was back in her car by 6:15. Thornwick was the kind of town that looked charming in postcards, but felt suffocating when you lived there. Population 3,200, 1 main street, 2 churches, a diner that closed at 8, and more judgment than a small-town gossip could carry in both hands. Maya had been here for 8 months, ever since her car broke down on the highway and she couldn't afford to fix it and keep driving. So she stayed. She found work doing odd jobs, fixing leaky faucets, patching drywall, replacing broken cabinet hinges. She was good with her hands, good at figuring out how things worked and how to make them work again. But no matter how many porches she repaired or how many clogged drains she cleared, the people of Thornwick still saw her the same way. The homeless girl, the one who slept in her car, the one who didn't belong. She pulled into the parking lot of Milton's Hardware just as the owner was unlocking the front door. Ed Milton was a gruff man in his 60s with a grey beard and hands like leather. He didn't smile much, but he paid her in cash and didn't ask questions. "You're early," he said. "Couldn't sleep," Maya replied. He grunted and handed her a list. "Got 3 service calls today. Widow Jansen's toilet is running. The Hendersons need their fence posts reset, and Pastor Graham's furnace is making a noise." Maya took the list and nodded. "I'll get it done." Ed looked at her for a long moment, then reached into his pocket and pulled out a $20 bill. "Get yourself some breakfast first. You look like hell." Maya's throat tightened. She wanted to refuse, wanted to tell him she was fine, but she wasn't fine, and they both knew it. She took the money and whispered, "Thank you." By the time the sun had fully risen, Maya had fixed Widow Jansen's toilet, reset 4 fence posts for the Hendersons, and was elbow-deep in Pastor Graham's furnace. The problem was a loose belt and a clogged air filter. Easy fix. 20 minutes, tops. Pastor Graham watched her work from the doorway, his arms crossed. "You know," he said, "there's a shelter 2 towns over. They help folks like you get back on their feet." Maya didn't look up. "I'm on my feet." "You're sleeping in your car." "I'm surviving." He sighed. "That's not the same as living." She tightened the last bolt and stood, wiping her hands on a rag. "Furnace is fixed. Should run quiet now." He paid her $40 and didn't say anything else. But she could feel his pity following her all the way to the door. By early afternoon, Maya had earned $87. She stopped at the diner and ordered a grilled cheese sandwich and a cup of coffee. The waitress, a woman named Diane, Set the plate down without making eye contact. At the booth behind her, two women whispered loud enough for her to hear. That's her, the one living out of her car. I heard she aged out of foster care, no family. Well, that's just sad, but why doesn't she leave, go somewhere with actual opportunities? Probably can't afford to. Maya chewed slowly, her jaw tight. She'd learned a long time ago that defending yourself only made people talk more. So she stayed quiet, finished her sandwich, left a tip she couldn't afford, and walked out. She was heading back to her car when she saw the flyer taped to the window of the county clerk's office. It was bright yellow, impossible to miss. Public auction, Blackwood Manor. Saturday, November 14th. Starting bid, $1. Maya stopped. She knew that name. Everyone in Thornwick knew Blackwood Manor. It sat on the edge of town, deep in the woods, surrounded by a rusted iron fence and decades of legend. The Blackwood family had been the wealthiest people in the county back in the 1900s. They owned land, businesses, mines. But in 1987, they disappeared. All of them. The parents, the daughter. Gone without a trace. The house had been empty ever since. People said it was haunted, cursed, that anyone who went inside never came out the same. The county had tried to sell it a dozen times, but no one ever bid. The property taxes alone were enough to scare people off. Maya stared at the flyer. $1 starting bid. She had $43 in her backpack, plus the $87 she'd just earned. That was $130. Enough for gas. Enough to leave Thornwick behind and try her luck somewhere else. Or enough to buy a house. The idea was insane. She knew that. But something about it made her heart pound. A house, a roof, walls, a place that was hers. Not a car, not a gym locker, a home. She pulled the flyer down and folded it carefully. The auction was on Saturday, 3 days away. Maya spent the next 2 days working every job she could find. She cleaned gutters, painted a garage, replaced a water heater. By Friday night, she had $275 in cash. It wasn't much, but it was everything. Saturday arrived cold and grey. The auction was held at 10 in the morning in the county clerk's office. Maya arrived at 9:45, her money folded in her front pocket, her stomach churning with nerves. The room was small and smelled like old paper and coffee. About 15 people had gathered. Most of them looked like they were there out of curiosity, not to actually bid. Maya recognized a few faces. A real estate agent, a lawyer, a couple of local business owners, and in the back, leaning against the wall with his arms crossed, was Richard Carmichael. Maya had seen him around town. He was in his 60s, tall and thin, with silver hair and expensive suits. He owned half the commercial properties in Thornwick and sat on the town council. People spoke his name with respect, with fear. He looked at Maya when she walked in, and for just a second something flashed across his face. Surprise, maybe irritation. Then it was gone, replaced by a thin smile. The county clerk, a balding man named Gerald, stood at the front of the room and cleared his throat. All right, folks, let's get started. We're here to auction the property known as Blackwood Manor, 112 acres. The house itself is approximately 8,000 square feet, built in 1893. Property taxes are owed in the amount of $67,000, which the buyer will assume responsibility for. A murmur ran through the room. 67,000. That explained why no one ever bought it. Gerald continued. The starting bid is $1. Do I have $1? Silence. Maya's hand shot up. A few people turned to look at her. Someone snickered. Gerald blinked. We have $1. Do I hear 5? Nothing. Going once, going twice. He paused, waiting. The room stayed quiet. Then, from the back, Richard Carmichael spoke. $10. Maya's heart sank. She turned to look at him. He wasn't even looking at her. He was looking at his phone. Gerald nodded. We have $10. Do I hear 15? Maya raised her hand. 15. Another snicker. Someone whispered, What is she doing? Carmichael didn't look up. 50. Maya swallowed hard. 75. Now people were staring. Diane, the waitress from the diner, shook her head. This is embarrassing. Carmichael finally looked at Maya. His eyes were cold, calculating. 100. Maya's hands were shaking. She had $175 left. If she bid more, she'd be all in. No gas money, no food money, nothing. But something in Carmichael's expression made her angry. He didn't need this house. He didn't even want it. He was bidding just to remind her of her place, to humiliate her. She lifted her chin. $275. The room went silent. Carmichael stared at her for a long moment. Then he smiled. It was the kind of smile that didn't reach his eyes. Good luck with that, he said quietly, and he walked out. Gerald looked around the room. Do I hear 300? Nothing. Going once, going twice. He brought the gavel down. Sold to the young lady for $275. A few people clapped. Most just stared. Maya stood frozen, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might crack her ribs. She'd just bought a house. Gerald handed her a stack of papers. You'll need to sign here and here. Taxes are due within 90 days, or the county repossesses the property. You understand that? Maya nodded, even though her hands were shaking so badly she could barely hold the pen. $67,000. 90 days. She had no idea how she'd come up with that kind of money, but she'd figure it out. She always did. She signed the papers, handed over her cash, and received a single iron key in return. Outside, the cold air hit her like a slap. She stood on the steps of the clerk's office, staring at the key in her hand. It was old, heavy. The metal was tarnished, but the teeth were still sharp. Behind her, she heard footsteps. She turned to see an older woman with white hair and kind eyes. The woman smiled gently. You just bought the Blackwood place? Maya nodded. The woman's smile faded. Be careful, dear. That house has a history. People have tried to go in before. Most don't stay long. Why not? The woman hesitated. Some say it's haunted. Others say it's cursed. I don't know what I believe, but I do know the Blackwoods didn't just disappear for no reason. Whatever happened to them, it happened in that house. Maya looked down at the key again. I don't believe in ghosts. The woman nodded slowly. Maybe you should. And with that, she walked away. Maya stood alone on the steps for a long moment. Then she got in her car and drove. The road to Blackwood Manor wound through dense forest. The trees grew so thick that even in the middle of the day, the light barely penetrated. The air smelled like pine and damp earth. After about 3 miles, the iron fence appeared. It was at least 8 feet tall, wrought iron twisted into intricate patterns. Vines had overgrown most of it, and the gate hung crooked on its hinges. Maya parked her car and got out. The gate wasn't locked. She pushed it open, and it groaned like something in pain. The driveway was gravel, cracked and overrun with weeds. She followed it on foot, her breath misting in the cold air. And then the house came into view. Blackwood Manor was massive. 3 stories of dark stone and tall windows. The roof was slate, some of the tiles missing. The front porch sagged slightly, and ivy climbed the walls like it was trying to pull the whole structure back into the earth. But even in its decay, it was beautiful, grand, the kind of place that had once held laughter and light. Maya climbed the front steps slowly, testing each one to make sure it would hold her weight. The front door was solid oak, carved with intricate designs. She slid the key into the lock. It turned smoothly, too smoothly. The door swung open, and Maya stepped inside. The entrance hall was cavernous. A grand staircase curved up to the 2nd floor. Dust covered everything, but beneath it she could see marble floors, crown molding, a chandelier hanging from the ceiling like a frozen waterfall. The air inside was cold, but it didn't smell musty. It smelled like old wood and faintly of lavender. Maya walked deeper into the house, her footsteps echoing. She passed through a sitting room with furniture still covered in white sheets. A dining room with a table long enough to seat 20. A kitchen with an old cast-iron stove and copper pots hanging from hooks. Everything was still here, like the family had just stepped out and never come back. She climbed the stairs to the 2nd floor. The wood creaked beneath her feet. but it felt solid. She found bedrooms, 5 of them, each one frozen in time. In one, a child's toys sat on a shelf. In another, a vanity held bottles of perfume, their labels faded but still readable. By the time she reached the 3rd floor, the light outside was fading. She found a small tower room with windows on all sides. From here, she could see the entire property. The forest, the overgrown gardens, the stone fountain in the courtyard dry and covered in moss. This was hers, all of it. Maya sank down onto the dusty floor and let herself cry. Not because she was sad, but because for the first time in her life, she had something that couldn't be taken away. A place, a foundation, a chance. She didn't know about the secrets buried in the walls. She didn't know about the fortune hidden in the shadows. She didn't know that powerful men were already planning how to take this from her. All she knew was that she wasn't homeless anymore, and that was enough for now. Maya woke to sunlight streaming through tall windows, dust particles dancing in the golden beams like tiny stars. For a moment, she forgot where she was. Then it hit her. She wasn't in her car. She was lying on the floor of Blackwood Manor, wrapped in her sleeping bag, surrounded by walls that were hers. Her back ached from sleeping on hardwood, but she didn't care. She sat up slowly, taking in the tower room in daylight. The wallpaper was faded, a delicate pattern of roses and vines. The windows, though dirty, were intact, real glass, wavy and old, the kind you couldn't buy anymore. She'd slept better than she had in months. After using the facilities in what appeared to be a remarkably well-preserved bathroom, complete with an old clawfoot tub, Maya decided to explore the house properly. Yesterday had been overwhelming, emotional. Today she needed to think practically. She needed to understand what she'd actually bought. The first thing that struck her as she moved through the rooms was how solid everything felt. Yes, there was dust. Yes, the furniture was covered in sheets, but the floors didn't sag, the walls weren't cracked. The windows, though they needed cleaning, weren't broken. For a house that had supposedly been abandoned for 36 years, it was in remarkable condition. In the kitchen, she turned one of the faucets experimentally. Nothing. The water had been shut off, which made sense, but the pipes looked good. No rust stains, no visible leaks. She made a mental note. She'd need to get the utilities turned back on. That would cost money she didn't have, but she'd figure it out. The more she explored, the more questions formed in her mind. In the library, she ran her finger along a bookshelf and frowned. There was dust, yes, but not as much as there should be. And when she opened one of the books, a leather-bound volume about property law, the pages weren't brittle. They were preserved, almost carefully so. Someone had been maintaining this place. Not living here, but keeping it from falling apart completely. But who, and why? Maya pulled out her notebook, the one she used for job estimates, and started making lists. Things that worked. Things that needed repair. Questions that needed answers. By midday, she'd covered the first 2 floors. She found linens still in closets, dishes still in cabinets, even canned goods in the pantry, though those were decades expired. In one bedroom, she found a 4-poster bed with a mattress that, while old, didn't seem damaged. She tested it cautiously. It would need new sheets, probably a thorough cleaning, but it was usable. The house had 14 rooms in total. 8 bedrooms, 3 bathrooms, a kitchen, a dining room, a library, a sitting room, a parlor, and something that looked like it had once been a study or office, though it had been cleared out, the desk empty, the filing cabinets bare. It was in the library that Maya's life changed again. She'd been examining the books, mostly legal texts, some history, a few novels from the early 1900s. Then she noticed something odd. One section of the bookshelf, about 3 feet wide, didn't quite match the others. The wood grain was similar, but not identical, and there was a slight gap, barely visible, between it and the section beside it. Maya pressed her hand against it. The wood was cool beneath her palm. She pushed harder. Nothing. She ran her fingers along the edges, searching for a latch, a button, anything. Then she remembered something her foster father had taught her. Old houses, he'd said. They loved their secrets. Hidden compartments, false panels. You just gotta know where to look. She stepped back and examined the bookshelf more carefully. There. At eye level, one of the decorative wooden roses carved into the frame looked slightly different. Cleaner. Like it had been touched more often. Maya reached up and pressed it. Something clicked deep within the wall. The bookshelf section swung inward with a whisper of well-oiled hinges, revealing a narrow doorway and a set of stairs leading down. Maya's heart began to pound. She pulled out her flashlight, clicked it on, and peered into the darkness. The stairs were wooden, steep, but they looked solid. The air that drifted up was cool and dry. She descended carefully, testing each step before putting her full weight on it. The staircase curved, leading her deeper beneath the house. At the bottom, her flashlight beam swept across a small room, maybe 10 feet by 12 feet. And every surface was covered with papers. File boxes were stacked against one wall. A desk sat in the center, its surface buried under folders and documents. Filing cabinets lined another wall. And on the desk, positioned as if someone had just been working there, was a leather journal, closed, with a pen resting on top. Maya approached slowly, almost reverently. She set down her flashlight and opened the journal. The handwriting was elegant, old-fashioned. The first entry was dated March 5th, 1987. They're closing in. I can feel it. Carmichael has been asking too many questions about the mineral rights, about the land grants. He knows the family is worth more than anyone realizes, and he wants it, all of it. I've tried going to the authorities, but he has friends everywhere. The sheriff, the judge, even the state auditor. I'm beginning to understand that fighting him openly would be suicide. So, I've decided to hide everything. Every deed, every stock certificate, every piece of evidence that proves what this family truly owns. If they come for us, they'll find nothing. And when it's safe, when someone uncorrupted can be trusted, the truth will emerge. I pray my granddaughter will forgive me for what I'm about to do. Maya's hands trembled as she turned the page. The next entry was dated March 12th, 1987. It's done. I've liquidated what I could without raising suspicion, converted assets to bearer bonds and certificates of deposit in a safety deposit box only I can access. The land deeds are here, in this room, the mineral rights documentation, the investment portfolios, everything. Carmichael thinks he's won. He's already started filing paperwork to have us declared legally dead, though we're very much alive. For now, I've sent my daughter and granddaughter away, told them to disappear, change their names, start over. It's the only way to keep them safe. They think I'm paranoid. They don't understand how dangerous Richard Carmichael truly is. I've made arrangements. If anything happens to me, if I disappear or die under suspicious circumstances, this house and everything in it will go to the county. And one day, someone will find this room. Someone who isn't afraid. Someone who will finish what I couldn't. Maya sat down hard in the desk chair. The name echoed in her mind. Richard Carmichael. The same man who had bid against her at the auction. The same man who had looked at her with those cold, calculating eyes. She flipped through more pages. The journal detailed everything. How Carmichael had systematically targeted the Blackwood family's wealth. How he'd used his position on the town council and his connections in the state government to manipulate property records, forge documents, and create legal loopholes. How he'd made the Blackwoods look like they were in debt when they were actually sitting on a fortune. The final entry was dated March 19th, 1987. Tonight, I leave. I've arranged for a car to take me across state lines. I'll disappear like the others. Let Carmichael think he's won. But this house, these walls, they'll hold the truth until someone brave enough comes along to claim it. To whoever finds this, you are not here by accident. This house chose you. Fight for it. Fight for what's right. And do not trust Richard Carmichael. He is a thief, a liar, and quite possibly a murderer. The evidence you need is in the filing cabinets. Use it wisely. Use it well. Signed, Jonathan Blackwood. Maya closed the journal and looked around the room with new eyes. This wasn't just a hidden office. It was a time capsule, A bomb waiting to go off. She stood and moved to the filing cabinets. They weren't locked. She pulled open the first drawer and gasped. Inside were hundreds of documents, all neatly organized and labeled. Property deeds, stock certificates, land grants dating back to 1873, mineral rights to 3 separate counties, investment portfolios with major corporations. She pulled out a folder labeled Current Valuation 1987 and opened it. Inside was a handwritten spreadsheet. At the bottom, circled 3 times in red ink, was a number. $287 million. 287 million. And that was in 1987, 36 years ago. Maya's legs gave out. She sank to the floor, the folder still clutched in her hands. This couldn't be real. This couldn't be happening. She was a homeless girl who fixed toilets for $40 a job. She wasn't an heiress. She wasn't anyone. But the documents didn't lie. She spent the next 3 hours going through the files. There were land deeds for properties all over the state, mining rights, water rights, stock certificates for companies that had probably grown exponentially since the 1980s. There were also legal documents, contracts and correspondence that showed in meticulous detail how Richard Carmichael had been systematically stealing from the Blackwood estate for decades. He'd declared the family legally dead in 1992, 5 years after they disappeared. Then he'd filed paperwork claiming to be the estate's administrator. He'd sold off some properties, pocketed the money, leased others, kept the revenue. He'd been living off Blackwood wealth for 36 years, and no one had questioned it because everyone believed the family was gone. Maya found a folder labeled Evidence of Fraud. Inside were copies of forged signatures, falsified death certificates, and bank statements showing transfers from Blackwood accounts to accounts controlled by Carmichael. This was it. This was everything she needed to destroy him. But as she sat there, surrounded by paper and possibility, a cold realization crept over her. If Richard Carmichael had been willing to make an entire family disappear to get this fortune, what would he do to a 19-year-old homeless girl who now stood in his way? That night, Maya couldn't sleep. She'd hauled her sleeping bag down to the hidden room and locked the bookshelf door from the inside. She knew it was paranoid, but Jonathan Blackwood's words kept echoing in her mind. Do not trust Richard Carmichael. He is a thief, a liar, and quite possibly a murderer. She lay in the darkness, her flashlight within reach, and listened to the house. It creaked and settled the way old houses do, but every sound made her heart race. Every groan of wood made her wonder if someone was inside. At 2 a.m, she heard something that made her blood freeze. Footsteps, upstairs, slow and deliberate, moving through the rooms above her. Maya sat up slowly, her hand closing around the flashlight. She barely breathed. The footsteps moved from the sitting room to the library. They paused directly above the hidden room. Maya's heart hammered so loudly she was sure whoever was up there could hear it. Then the footsteps moved away, heading toward the stairs, going up, not down. They climbed to the 2nd floor, then the 3rd. She heard doors opening and closing. Someone was searching the house. What happens next will shatter everything Maya thought she knew, reveal a connection she never saw coming, and remind us that some secrets are buried so deep, even the walls forget they're there. Stay tuned to see what happens next. If you're enjoying the story, please like, share, and subscribe for more. Maya waited in the darkness for what felt like hours. Finally, the footsteps descended. They moved through the 1st floor one more time, slower now, as if whoever it was being more thorough. Then, after an eternity, she heard the front door open and close. She waited another 30 minutes before she dared move. Then, flashlight in hand, she crept up the stairs and pushed the bookshelf open just a crack. The library was empty. Moonlight streamed through the windows. Everything looked untouched. She moved through the house cautiously, checking each room. Nothing seemed disturbed. But when she reached the front door, she saw something that made her stomach drop. Fresh mud on the floor, boot prints, large ones, and they led from the door to the library and back again. Someone had been here. Someone knew she was living in this house. and they'd been looking for something. Maya didn't go back to sleep. She sat on the stairs with her back against the wall, the flashlight in her lap, and waited for dawn. When morning finally came, she made a decision. She couldn't do this alone. She needed help. She needed someone she could trust, someone who knew this town and its secrets. The problem was, she didn't know anyone in Thornwick. Not really. Ed Milton had been kind to her, but she barely knew him. Pastor Graham had offered pity, not friendship. The people at the diner looked through her like she was glass. Then she remembered something. When she was researching the Blackwood family at the public library a few months ago, before she'd even known about the auction, the librarian had been helpful. An older woman with silver hair and reading glasses on a chain. She'd pulled out old newspapers for Maya, shown her where the historical records were kept. She'd been kind without being condescending. Maya showered quickly in the clawfoot tub using bottled water she'd bought, changed into her cleanest clothes, and drove into town. The library didn't open until 10, so she waited in her car, watching people go about their morning routines, watching a world that had no idea what she'd discovered. At exactly 10 o'clock, she walked into the library. The older woman was at the front desk, stamping returned books. She looked up and smiled. "Well, hello there. I heard you bought the old Blackwood place. That true?" Maya nodded. "Yes, ma'am." The woman's smile faded slightly. "That's a lot of house for someone so young." "I know." Maya glanced around. The library was empty except for the two of them. "Can I ask you something? About the Blackwoods?" The woman set down her stamp. "You can ask. Whether I have answers is another matter." "Did you know them? The family?" The woman was quiet for a long moment. Then she came around the desk and gestured for Maya to follow her. She led her to a small office in the back, closed the door, and sat down. "My name is Dorothy Walsh," she said. "And yes, I knew the Blackwoods. I worked for them." Maya's eyes widened. "You were their housekeeper?" Dorothy nodded slowly. "For 23 years. I was there when the daughter Caroline was born. I was there when her daughter was born. I was there the night they all disappeared." "What happened?" Maya whispered. Dorothy's hands trembled slightly as she folded them in her lap. "Jonathan Blackwood came to me on March 19th, 1987. He gave me an envelope with 6 months' wages and told me to leave, to forget I'd ever worked there. He said it wasn't safe anymore. I asked him what he meant, but he wouldn't tell me. He just said, 'Dorothy, you've been loyal to this family for over 2 decades. I'm asking you to be loyal one more time. Leave tonight. Don't come back. Don't ask questions.' So I did. I took the money and I left." "And you never saw them again?" "Never." 3 days later, Richard Carmichael announced that the family had abandoned the property. A week after that, he filed paperwork claiming they'd defaulted on debts I knew didn't exist. I wanted to say something, to tell someone, but I was scared. Carmichael was powerful. He had connections, and I was just a housekeeper. Maya leaned forward. "What if I told you I found Jonathan's journal, and documents proving everything you just said?" Dorothy's breath caught. "You found the hidden room." "You knew about it?" "I suspected. There were days when Jonathan would disappear for hours. I'd see him go into the library, but he wouldn't be there when I looked. I figured there was a hidden space, but I never found it." Maya pulled out her phone and showed Dorothy photos she'd taken of some of the documents. Dorothy's eyes filled with tears as she looked at them. "Oh my God," she whispered. "He kept everything. He documented everything." "Dorothy," Maya said carefully, "I need to ask you something important. What happened to Caroline's daughter, to the granddaughter?" Dorothy wiped her eyes. "Caroline left town in late 1986. She was pregnant, unmarried, terrified. Jonathan told her to go far away, to start over. He gave her money and told her never to contact him again. It was for her safety." "Did she have the baby?" "I don't know. She never called, never wrote. It was like she vanished." Maya's heart was pounding. What was Caroline's middle name? Dorothy frowned. "Chen. Her mother's maiden name was Chen. Caroline Chen Blackwood. Why?" Maya felt the room tilt. Chen. Her last name was Chen, the name she'd been given by the state when she entered foster care because she had no family, no records, just a first name Maya and a note that said her mother had died in childbirth. "Dorothy," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "What did Caroline look like?" Dorothy stood and walked to a filing cabinet. She pulled out a folder, one she apparently kept for herself, and opened it. Inside was a photograph. A young woman, maybe 20 years old, with dark hair and dark eyes and a smile that looked achingly familiar. She looked like Maya, not similar, not kind of like her. She looked exactly like Maya. Dorothy stared at the photograph, then at Maya, then back at the photograph. Her hand flew to her mouth. "Oh my God, you're her. You're Caroline's daughter." Maya couldn't speak, couldn't breathe. The room was spinning and her heart was breaking and mending all at once. She wasn't just some random homeless girl who'd stumbled onto a fortune. She was a Blackwood. This was her inheritance, her legacy, her family. Dorothy was crying now, openly. "She must have died. Caroline must have died when you were born, and you ended up in the system with no records, no family. Oh, sweetheart, you've been alone all this time, and you were never supposed to be." Maya's own tears came then, hot and fast, for the years she'd spent in foster homes, for the birthdays no one remembered, for the loneliness that had carved itself so deep into her bones she thought it was permanent, for the mother she never knew, and the grandfather who had tried to protect them all. Dorothy reached across the desk and took Maya's hands. "You're not alone anymore. Do you understand me? You're a Blackwood, and I'm going to help you." Over the next hour, Dorothy told Maya everything she knew about the family's wealth, which was even greater than Maya had realized, about Richard Carmichael's decades-long fraud, about the way he'd manipulated the legal system to steal everything. "He's been living off your family's money for 36 years, Dorothy said, her voice hard. "He bought his properties with Blackwood funds. He sends his grandchildren to private schools on Blackwood investments. Everything he has, he stole from you." "Can we prove it?" Maya asked. "With what you found in that room? Absolutely. But Maya, you need to understand something. Richard Carmichael is dangerous. He didn't just steal money. He made your family disappear. If he finds out what you know, if he realizes who you are, he'll try to make me disappear too," Maya finished. Dorothy nodded grimly. "We need to be smart about this. We need a lawyer, a real one, not someone Carmichael can intimidate or buy off." "I don't have money for a lawyer." "No," Dorothy said, "but I know someone who might help anyway. His name is James Porter. He's young, only been practicing for 3 years, but he's good. More importantly, he's honest. His parents lost their farm to some shady legal maneuvering a few years back. He understands what it's like when powerful people abuse the system." That afternoon, Dorothy made the call. James Porter agreed to meet with them the next day at the library. In the meantime, Maya returned to Blackwood Manor. She went straight to the hidden room and started organizing the evidence. She photographed every document. She created a timeline using Jonathan's journal. She built a case that would be impossible to refute. But as the sun set and shadows filled the house, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched. She kept looking over her shoulder, kept listening for footsteps, and when she finally climbed the stairs to try to sleep, she found something that made her blood run cold. On the bed in the master bedroom, the bed she'd been sleeping in, someone had left a note. It was written on expensive stationery, in elegant handwriting. "Miss Chen, you have stumbled into something you don't understand. The Blackwood estate is complicated, and there are legal matters that must be resolved through proper channels. I would like to invite you to my office tomorrow at 2 in the afternoon to discuss your options. I believe we can come to an arrangement that benefits everyone. Respectfully, Richard Carmichael." Maya stared at the note, her hands shaking. He knew she'd found something, and he was already making his move. She grabbed her phone and called Dorothy. "He was in my house. He left a note." "What does it say?" Maya read it aloud. Dorothy was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Don't go. It's a trap." "I know, but Dorothy, if he was in my house, if he can get in whenever he wants," Maya's voice cracked. I'm not safe here. Then pack a bag and come stay with me. We'll figure this out together. Maya packed quickly, throwing clothes and documents into her backpack. She took the most important files from the hidden room, including Jonathan's journal. She closed the bookshelf door and locked it. Then she walked through the house one more time, this beautiful haunted house that was hers by blood and by purchase. She wasn't running away. She was regrouping. There was a difference. As she drove away from Blackwood Manor, she looked in her rearview mirror. The house stood dark against the night sky, its windows like watching eyes. And for just a moment, she could have sworn she saw a figure standing on the front porch, tall, thin, watching her leave. She pressed harder on the gas and didn't look back again. Dorothy's house was a small cottage on Maple Street, the kind of place with lace curtains and a garden that probably bloomed beautifully in spring. Right now, in late November, it looked like every other house on the block. Ordinary, safe, forgettable. That was exactly what Maya needed. Dorothy met her at the door before she could knock, pulling her inside quickly and locking the deadbolt behind them. "Did anyone follow you?" Maya shook her head. "I don't think so. I kept checking the mirrors." The older woman's living room was warm and cluttered with the comfortable chaos of someone who'd lived alone for a long time. Books everywhere, knitting projects in various states of completion, photographs on every surface. Dorothy cleared a spot on the couch and gestured for Maya to sit. "You'll stay in the guest room. It's small, but it's yours for as long as you need it." Maya's throat tightened. "I can't ask you to—" "You're not asking. I'm offering. That family gave me 23 good years. I should have spoken up when they disappeared. I should have fought. I didn't, so now I'm fighting. And you're going to let me—" There was steel beneath Dorothy's gentle exterior. Maya nodded, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. That night, she lay in Dorothy's guest room, staring at the ceiling. The bed was soft, the blankets smelled like lavender, and for the first time in months, she felt physically safe. But her mind wouldn't quiet. It kept circling back to the same questions. What did Carmichael know? How much had he figured out? And what would he do when she didn't show up to his office tomorrow? She must have finally fallen asleep, because the next thing she knew, sunlight was streaming through floral curtains, and Dorothy was knocking softly on the door. "Maya, James Porter is here." Maya sat up quickly, running her fingers through her tangled hair. "Give me 5 minutes." She dressed quickly in jeans and a flannel shirt, washed her face, and joined them in the living room. James Porter was younger than she expected. Maybe 27 or 28, with dark hair that was slightly too long and glasses that he kept pushing up his nose. He wore khakis and a button-down shirt with the sleeves rolled up, and when he stood to shake her hand, his grip was firm. "Miss Chen, Dorothy's told me a little, but I'd like to hear it from you. Start at the beginning." So Maya did. She told him about the auction, about exploring the house, about finding the hidden room. She showed him photographs of the documents on her phone. She showed him Jonathan Blackwood's journal. And when she told him about the note Carmichael had left on her bed, James's expression darkened. "That's breaking and entering. We could file charges." "Against Richard Carmichael," Dorothy said. "He'd have it dismissed before the ink dried on the paperwork. You know how this town works, James." He nodded grimly. "Yeah, I do." He turned to Maya. "But here's what matters. You legally purchased that property. Everything in that house is legally yours. And if these documents prove what I think they prove, you're not just the owner of the house, you're the heir to the Blackwood estate." "Can we prove that?" Maya asked. "That I'm Caroline's daughter?" James thought for a moment. "We'd need DNA evidence. Is there anything in the house that might have Caroline's DNA? A hairbrush? Clothing?" Maya's eyes widened. "The bedrooms. They're preserved like time capsules. There's got to be something." "Then we go back and we get it. Today. Before Carmichael realizes you're not showing up to his little meeting." Dorothy stood. "I'm coming with you." "Dorothy," Maya started, "I know that house better than anyone alive. If we're looking for Caroline's things, I know exactly where they'd be." James looked between them, then nodded. "All right. But we go in fast and we get out faster. And Maya, you need to understand something. Once we have DNA proof, once we file the paperwork claiming you as the legal heir, this becomes a war. Carmichael has spent 36 years building his life on stolen money. He's not going to give it up without a fight. I know, Maya said quietly. But it's not about the money. It's about the truth. My grandfather spent his last days hiding evidence because he believed someone would eventually care enough to use it. I'm not going to let him down. They took James's car, a practical sedan that didn't stand out. The drive to Blackwood Manor felt longer than usual. Maya kept watching the road behind them, but no one followed. When they pulled up to the iron gates, everything looked exactly as she'd left it. Quiet. Still. Waiting. The front door was locked, just as she'd left it. Maya used her key and pushed it open slowly. The entrance hall was flooded with morning light, dust motes dancing in the beams. Nothing seemed disturbed. Dorothy stepped inside and stopped, her hand flying to her heart. "Oh," she whispered. "It's exactly the same." She moved through the rooms like a ghost revisiting her past, touching furniture, straightening picture frames that had tilted over the decades. In the sitting room, she picked up a small porcelain figurine and cradled it in her hands. Caroline gave this to her mother for Christmas in 1983. She saved up her allowance for 3 months. Maya watched the older woman's face, saw the tears gathering in her eyes, and felt her own throat tighten. This house wasn't just architecture and possessions. It was memory. It was love turned to stone and wood. "Dorothy," James said gently. "Caroline's room?" She nodded and led them upstairs. The second door on the left opened into a bedroom that had once been painted soft blue. A 4-poster bed dominated the space, still made with a faded quilt. Posters of 1980s bands hung on the walls. A desk by the window held notebooks and pens, as if Caroline might return any moment to finish her homework. Dorothy went straight to the vanity. On its surface sat bottles of perfume, a jewelry box, and a silver hairbrush. She picked up the brush carefully, and there, tangled in the bristles, were strands of dark hair. "This was hers," Dorothy said. "She used it every night before bed." James pulled out an evidence bag from his pocket. "May I?" Dorothy handed it over, and James carefully sealed the hairbrush inside. "This should be enough for DNA testing. I have a friend who works at a private lab in the city. He owes me a favor. We can have results in 72 hours. "What do we do until then?" Maya asked. "We build the case. I want copies of every document in that hidden room, every deed, every stock certificate, every piece of evidence of Carmichael's fraud. We're going to bury him in paper." They spent the next 3 hours photographing and scanning documents. James had brought a portable scanner, and they worked in assembly line fashion. Dorothy would pull files from the cabinets, Maya would organize them, and James would scan them, uploading everything to an encrypted cloud server. The more they uncovered, the more staggering the scope became. The Blackwood estate wasn't worth $287 million as of 1987. Based on current property values and stock growth, James estimated it was worth closer to $400 million, maybe more. "Jesus," he muttered, looking at a land deed. "This property alone, the mining rights, they're sitting on top of one of the largest lithium deposits in the state. Do you know what lithium is worth right now? With electric cars, with battery technology." Maya shook her head. "It's worth a fortune, an absolute fortune. And Carmichael has been leasing the mining rights for pennies compared to what they're actually worth, pocketing the difference." By early afternoon, they had scanned over 300 documents. James's laptop was filled with evidence that would take down not just Carmichael, but potentially dozens of people who'd benefited from his fraud over the years. They were packing up to leave when Maya heard it. A car engine, coming up the driveway. James heard it too. He moved to the window and looked out. Black SUV, tinted windows. Dorothy went pale. "That's Carmichael's car." "Back door," Maya said. "There's a back door through the kitchen." They grabbed what they could, James clutching his laptop, Maya with her backpack full of original documents. Dorothy with the evidence bag containing the hairbrush. They ran through the library, through the dining room, into the kitchen. Maya fumbled with the old lock on the back door. Behind them, they heard the front door open. "Miss Chen?" Carmichael's voice echoed through the house, smooth, controlled. "I know you're here. Your car is parked out front." The lock finally gave way. They slipped outside into the overgrown garden just as footsteps entered the kitchen behind them. They didn't run. Running would make noise. Instead, they moved quickly and quietly through the tall grass, through the hedges, around the side of the house toward where James had parked. But when they rounded the corner, Maya's heart sank. Two men in dark suits stood beside James's car. One of them saw them and straightened. "Mr. Carmichael," he called out, "they're here." They were trapped. James stepped in front of Maya and Dorothy. "We're leaving. You have no legal right to detain us." One of the men smiled. It wasn't friendly. "This is private property." "It's her property," James shot back, gesturing to Maya. "She bought it legally at public auction. You're the ones trespassing." Carmichael appeared from the front of the house, moving with the unhurried confidence of someone who'd never been told no in his life. He was dressed impeccably in a charcoal suit, his silver hair perfectly styled. Up close, Maya could see he was older than she'd thought, maybe 70, but his eyes were sharp and cold. "James Porter," he said, his tone almost pleasant. "I should have known you'd involve yourself in this. Still fighting windmills, I see." "Still stealing from people who can't fight back, I see," James replied. Carmichael's smile never wavered. "Miss Chen, you didn't come to our meeting. I was concerned." Maya found her voice. "I'm not interested in making deals with you." "That's unfortunate, because I'm offering you a very generous settlement. $500,000 for the property, cash, today. You can walk away, start a new life somewhere far from here, and forget any of this ever happened." "500,000? Maya laughed, but it came out bitter. "This estate is worth $400 million. Did you really think I wouldn't figure that out?" Something flickered in Carmichael's expression. Not surprise. Confirmation. He'd known she'd found the documents. "The estate you're referring to," he said carefully, "was declared legally defunct in 1992. The Blackwood family abandoned their holdings. I've been managing those assets in accordance with state law regarding abandoned property." "You've been stealing," Dorothy said, her voice shaking but firm. "I worked for that family for 23 years. I know what you did. I know you forced them to disappear." Carmichael's eyes shifted to her, and for the first time, his pleasant mask cracked. "Dorothy. After all these years, still loyal to ghosts. How touching." "They weren't ghosts, they were people, good people, and you destroyed them." "I did what was necessary to prevent a family fortune from rotting away through mismanagement. Jonathan Blackwood was a fool. He'd rather hide his wealth than use it. I've invested it, grown it, created jobs. I've done more for this county than the Blackwoods ever did." "With money that wasn't yours," James said. "And now the legal heir has come forward to claim what's rightfully hers." Carmichael's attention snapped to Maya. "Legal heir? Based on what evidence?" James held up the evidence bag with the hairbrush. "DNA evidence proving Maya Chen is Caroline Blackwood's daughter. We're filing the claim tomorrow." For several long seconds, Carmichael didn't move. Then he smiled again, and this time it was genuinely amused. "Caroline's daughter. How wonderfully dramatic. And you think a judge will simply hand over $400 million to a homeless girl based on a DNA test?" "We have more than a DNA test," Maya said. "We have Jonathan Blackwood's journal. We have documents proving you forged death certificates. We have bank records showing you've been embezzling for 36 years. We have everything." Carmichael's amusement faded. "I see. Well then, this is more serious than I thought." He turned to the men beside the car. "Gentlemen, please escort these people off the property." "It's my property," Maya said again, louder this time. "Actually," Carmichael said, pulling a document from his jacket pocket, "as of this morning, it's not. You see, you failed to pay the property taxes within the grace period. The county has repossessed the property, and I've purchased it through a private sale. Quite legal, I assure you. Maya felt the ground tilt beneath her. That's impossible. I have 90 days. You had 90 days from the date of purchase, but there was a clause in the sale agreement. If the property is found to be in violation of county health and safety codes, the grace period is voided and immediate payment is required. He smiled. I had the property inspected yesterday. Multiple violations, unsafe wiring, structural concerns. The county notified you this morning, though I suppose you didn't receive the notice since you weren't residing at your legal address. You set this up, James said. You manufactured violations. I followed the law. Now, I'm going to ask you nicely one more time. Leave this property, or I'll have you arrested for trespassing. Maya looked at James, at Dorothy, at the men blocking their path to the car. They were beaten. Carmichael had outmaneuvered them before they'd even known they were in a game. Fine, she said, we'll leave, but this isn't over. Oh, I think it is, Carmichael said. You're a brave girl, Miss Chen, but bravery without resources is just noise. Go back to sleeping in your car. Go back to fixing toilets. Leave the real estate to people who understand how the world actually works. The men stepped aside, allowing them to reach James's car. They climbed in silently, James started the engine, and they drove away from Blackwood Manor. Maya watched it disappear in the side mirror, and something inside her broke. They'd lost. The drive back to Dorothy's house was silent. James gripped the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles were white. Dorothy stared out the window, tears rolling down her cheeks. Maya sat in the back seat, numb. When they finally reached the cottage, they sat in the parked car for a long moment before anyone spoke. He can't do this, Dorothy finally said. There has to be something we can do. James shook his head. He's right. Technically, he followed the law. The health and safety clause is standard in tax-delinquent sales, and if he got a county inspector to sign off on violations, even manufactured ones, the repossession is legal. So that's it? Maya's voice was hollow. He just wins? No, James said firmly. We still have the documents. We still have the DNA evidence. We can still prove you're the legal heir, and we can still prove he's been committing fraud. But it's going to be a long fight, months, maybe years. And we're going up against someone with unlimited resources and connections everywhere. I don't have months, Maya said. I have $43 and a car that needs new brake pads. Dorothy turned to look at her. You have me, and you have James, and you have the truth. The truth doesn't pay for lawyers. It doesn't pay for DNA tests. It doesn't... Maya's voice cracked. She pressed her hands to her face. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I thought I could do this, but I can't. I'm just some stupid kid who thought she could take on a millionaire and win. You're not stupid, James said quietly. And you're not alone. Look, I can't take this case pro bono indefinitely. I have student loans. I have rent. But I can give you time, and I know people, journalists, investigators, people who care about this kind of corruption. We need more than caring, Maya said. We need proof that will hold up in court. We need... She stopped. An idea was forming. Dangerous. Maybe insane, but possible. We need to get back into that house. James turned to stare at her. Maya, he just kicked us out. If we go back, we're trespassing. We could be arrested. I know, but think about it. He's had less than 24 hours with that house. He doesn't know it like I do. He doesn't know about all the hiding places, all the rooms, all the secrets. There are documents we didn't get. There's evidence we didn't scan. And most importantly, there's the safety deposit box. Dorothy sat up straight. The one Jonathan mentioned in his journal. Maya nodded. He said he converted assets to bearer bonds and certificates of deposit. He said they were in a safety deposit box only he could access. We never found a key, but it has to be somewhere in that house. Even if we find it, James said, we don't know which bank. We don't know the box number. Jonathan was meticulous. If there's a key, there's documentation. We just have to find it. James was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, if we do this, if we break into that house, we can't get caught. Evidence obtained illegally can't be used in court. It would destroy our entire case." "Then we don't get caught," Maya said. Dorothy looked between them. "When?" "Tonight," Maya said. "Before he has time to search the place properly himself, before he changes the locks or posts security." They spent the rest of the afternoon planning. James used his laptop to pull up satellite images of the property, mapping entry and exit points. Dorothy drew floor plans from memory, marking which floorboards creaked, which windows stuck, which doors had working locks. Maya went through the photographs on her phone, looking for any clue about where Jonathan might have hidden a safety deposit key. At 7 o'clock, they ate dinner. None of them had much appetite. At 8, they gathered their supplies: dark clothing, flashlights, lockpicks that James had from his brief rebellious phase in college, bags to carry whatever they found. At 9, they drove toward Blackwood Manor with the headlights off. The property was dark. No lights in the windows, no cars in the driveway. Either Carmichael was supremely confident, or he hadn't yet stationed security. Maya hoped it was the former. They parked half a mile away and walked through the woods, guided by moonlight and Dorothy's memory of paths she'd walked decades ago. The trees were thick here, the undergrowth tangled, but Dorothy led them without hesitation. When they reached the edge of the property, they stopped and watched. The house loomed against the night sky, dark and silent. No movement, no sound except wind in the trees. "Kitchen window," Dorothy whispered. "Third from the left. The latch has been broken since 1984. Jonathan kept meaning to fix it, but he never got around to it." They crept across the lawn, keeping to the shadows. When they reached the window, Maya tested it gently. It slid open with barely a whisper. She climbed through first, landing softly on the kitchen floor. James and Dorothy followed. Inside, the house felt different at night. The shadows were deeper, the silence more complete. Maya led them to the library, to the hidden room. They descended the stairs and began searching in earnest. James scanned more documents while Maya and Dorothy searched every drawer, every file, every book for something they might have missed. An hour passed, then 2. Maya was beginning to lose hope when Dorothy made a small sound. "What is it?" Maya whispered. Dorothy was holding Jonathan's journal, the one they'd already read cover to cover, but she'd found something they'd missed, a hidden pocket in the back cover. And inside that pocket was a small brass key with a number engraved on it, 173. "Safety deposit box 173, James breathed. Dorothy kept searching the pocket and pulled out a business card. It was old, faded, but still readable. First National Bank of Riverside, established 1923. "Riverside is 2 hours north," James said, "but if that box is still active, if the bank still exists—" "We can access it," Maya finished, "if we can prove I'm the legal heir." "Which means we need that DNA test processed, fast." They were so focused on their discovery that none of them heard the car pull up outside. They didn't hear the front door open. They didn't hear footsteps descending the stairs until it was too late. Light flooded the hidden room. Maya spun around, shielding her eyes. When her vision cleared, she saw him. Richard Carmichael stood at the bottom of the stairs, flanked by the same 2 men from earlier. But this time, one of them was holding a gun. "I had a feeling you'd come back," Carmichael said. "You're predictable, Miss Chen. The desperate always are." James stepped forward. "We're leaving. Right now." "I'm afraid not." Carmichael descended the last step and moved into the room. His eyes swept across the scattered documents, the open filing cabinets, the journal still in Dorothy's hands. "Breaking and entering, theft of property, that's quite serious. I could have you all arrested." "This is her property," James said. "You know it is. Everything in this house belongs to the Blackwood estate, and she's the legal heir." "Prove it," Carmichael said simply. Maya held up the brass key. "We will. This key opens a safety deposit box containing bearer bonds and certificates worth millions. Bonds that Jonathan Blackwood put there before you forced him to disappear, before you stole everything from his family." Carmichael's eyes fixed on the key. For the first time, He looked genuinely unsettled. "Where did you find that?" "In a place you never would have looked, because you didn't know this family. You didn't care about them. You just wanted their money." Carmichael was silent for a long moment. Then he held out his hand. "Give me the key." "No. Give me the key, or I'll have my associates take it from you. And trust me, they won't be gentle." The man with the gun took a step forward. Maya's heart was pounding so hard she thought it might explode. She looked at James, at Dorothy, and made a decision. She ran, not toward the stairs, because that was blocked, but toward the back of the room, where she'd noticed during their earlier search that there was a ventilation grate. It was old, probably part of the original foundation, and it was just big enough for someone small to squeeze through. She heard shouting behind her, heard footsteps. She wrenched the grate open and dove through, scraping her shoulders, her hips, her knees. The passage beyond was narrow and dark and smelled like earth, but she crawled forward desperately. Behind her she heard Carmichael shouting, "Get her! Don't let her get away with that key!" The passage angled upward. Her hands found stone, then dirt, then wood. She pushed against what felt like a trapdoor and it gave way. She tumbled out into cold night air, gasping. She was in the garden, near the old fountain. She could hear voices from inside the house, could see flashlight beams through the windows. She ran toward the woods, her lungs burning. The brass key clutched so tightly in her fist it cut into her palm. She didn't stop running until she reached the road where they'd parked the car. But the car was gone. James must have moved it, must have thought they'd been caught, must have... Headlights appeared around the bend. Maya dove behind a tree, ready to run again, but the car that pulled up was James's sedan. The passenger door flew open. "Get in!" James shouted. Maya threw herself into the car. Dorothy was in the back seat, her face pale. James hit the gas before Maya even had her door closed. "What happened?" Maya gasped. "We got out through the main stairs while they were chasing you," James said. "Dorothy knows that house better than they do. She led them on a chase while I circled back for the car." "The documents? We left them. Had to. But I got the journal. And you got the key." Maya held it up. The small brass key gleamed in the dashboard light. "Then we have what we came for," Dorothy said. "We have what we need to finish this." They drove through the night, taking back roads, doubling back twice to make sure they weren't followed. By the time they reached Dorothy's house, it was nearly 3 in the morning. Inside, they collapsed in the living room, running on adrenaline and fear. "He'll come after us," Maya said. "He knows we have the key." "Let him," James said. "Because tomorrow morning, I'm filing an emergency injunction. I'm going to the State Attorney General's office with everything we have, and I'm going to make sure every newspaper in the state knows what Richard Carmichael has been doing for the last 36 years. "Will it be enough?" Dorothy asked. James looked at Maya. "With the DNA evidence proving you're the heir? With the journal documenting everything? With that key proving there are assets he's never disclosed?" "Yeah, it'll be enough." Maya stared at the key in her hand. It was such a small thing, barely 2 inches long, but it represented everything. Justice, truth, the vindication of a man who died trying to protect his family. "We're going to win this," she said quietly. "Not because we're smarter or richer or more powerful, but because we're right, and sometimes that has to be enough." The morning light was just beginning to break through the curtains when they finally allowed themselves to sleep. Maya curled up on Dorothy's couch, the brass key tucked safely in her pocket, and closed her eyes. She dreamed of Blackwood Manor, but in her dreams it wasn't dark or empty. It was filled with light and laughter, with a family she'd never known, with a grandfather who'd fought for her before she was even born, and when she woke, she knew exactly what she had to do. The war with Richard Carmichael had just begun, and Maya Chen, the homeless girl who'd bought a haunted house for $275, was ready to fight. The DNA results came back in 72 hours, just as James's contact had promised. Maya sat at Dorothy's kitchen table, hands shaking as she stared at the document. Probability of maternity, 99.97%. Caroline Chen Blackwood was her mother. She was a Blackwood, Not just legally through inheritance, but by blood. Dorothy squeezed her shoulder. Your grandfather would be so proud. Maya wiped at her eyes. He never even met me. He died protecting you. That's love, sweetheart. The deepest kind. James spread more papers across the table. With this, we can file. I've drafted a petition claiming you as the sole legal heir to the Blackwood estate. I've included copies of the journal, the documents we scanned, and a motion to freeze all assets currently controlled by Richard Carmichael pending investigation. How long will it take? Maya asked. In a normal case, months, maybe a year, but I've been making calls. The State Attorney General's office is interested. Very interested. Turns out Carmichael has been on their radar for years, but they've never had enough evidence to move forward. Until now. He pulled out his laptop and turned it toward Maya. On the screen was an email from an Attorney General investigator named Sarah Chen. No relation, apparently, though Maya found the coincidence strange. The email was brief but powerful. If you have documentation of systematic fraud spanning 3 decades involving public officials and illegal appropriation of a multi-million-dollar estate, we want to meet. Tomorrow, 10 a.m. State Capitol. Maya looked up at James. They believe us? They believe the evidence. I sent them everything we scanned. They've been digging all night. He pulled up another window, this one showing a news article. The headline read, County Property Records Under Investigation Following Allegations of Fraud. Maya's breath caught. It's already public. I may have reached out to a reporter friend at the state paper, anonymously, of course. Once the Attorney General's office started their investigation, it became public record. The media did the rest. Dorothy leaned over to read the article. Look at this. They're questioning the legitimacy of dozens of property transfers over the last 30 years. They're interviewing people who lost their homes to foreclosure. People who were forced to sell to Carmichael at below-market rates. We're not the only victims, Maya said quietly. No, James agreed, but you're the one with the evidence to take him down. That night, Maya couldn't sleep. She stood at the window of Dorothy's guest room, staring out at the quiet street. Somewhere out there, Richard Carmichael was awake too. Plotting, planning, preparing his counterattack. She knew he wouldn't go down without a fight. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. You're making a mistake, Miss Chen. Some battles can't be won. Think about your future. 500,000 is still on the table. Maya deleted it without responding. The next morning, they drove to the state capitol. The Attorney General's office was in a modern building downtown, all glass and steel. Sarah Chen met them in the lobby. She was in her 40s, sharp-eyed, with an air of someone who didn't waste time. Miss Chen, Mr. Porter, Mrs. Walsh, follow me. She led them to a conference room where 3 other people waited. Investigators, lawyers, people with badges and serious expressions. On the table was a stack of documents 6 inches thick. We've been busy, Sarah said, pulling records, interviewing witnesses, cross-referencing financial statements. What you've uncovered is bigger than we initially thought. Richard Carmichael hasn't just been defrauding the Blackwood estate. He's been running a sophisticated land fraud scheme for over 3 decades. Using his position on the county council to manipulate zoning laws, tax assessments, and foreclosure proceedings, we've identified at least 47 victims, maybe more. Maya felt dizzy. 47 families? That we know of so far. Some lost their homes, some lost businesses. All of them were targeted because they owned property Carmichael wanted. He'd manipulate them into financial distress, then swoop in with a low offer or force a foreclosure. All perfectly legal on the surface, but deeply corrupt underneath. One of the other investigators, a man with graying hair, spoke up. The problem is proving intent. Carmichael is careful. He uses shell companies, third-party buyers, layers of legitimate-looking transactions. Breaking through that takes time and resources. Which is why you're so valuable, Sarah said, looking at Maya. You have something none of those other victims had. Direct evidence. Jonathan Blackwood documented everything. His journal is a roadmap to Carmichael's entire operation. And with your DNA proof, we can establish that Carmichael has been illegally controlling assets that rightfully belong to you." "What do you need from me?" Maya asked. "Your testimony, your cooperation, and that safety deposit box key." Maya had been expecting this. She pulled the brass key from her pocket and set it on the table. "First National Bank of Riverside, box 173. Sarah picked it up, examined it. "We'll get a warrant. If there are bearer bonds in that box, they're untraceable. Whoever holds them owns them. But with the journal as documentation and your status as heir, we can make the case that they belong to you." "When?" James asked. "This afternoon. Judge Hawthorne owes me a favor. We'll have the warrant by 3 p.m. and execute it immediately." The older investigator cleared his throat. "You should know, Miss Chen, that once we move forward with this, you'll be in the spotlight. Media attention, public scrutiny, and Carmichael will come after you with everything he has: character assassination, frivolous lawsuits. He'll try to paint you as a con artist, an opportunist." "Let him try," Maya said. "I've been called worse by better people." Sarah smiled slightly. "Good, because we're going to need that strength." They spent the next 2 hours going over every detail. Maya walked them through finding the hidden room, discovering the journal, realizing who she was. Dorothy provided background on the family, on Carmichael's relationship with them before they disappeared. James presented the legal framework for why Maya was the rightful heir. By the time they left, Maya felt simultaneously empowered and terrified. This was really happening. The fight she'd started when she bid $275 on a haunted house was about to become a public battle that could reshape the entire county. At exactly 3:15 that afternoon, Sarah Chen called. "We have the warrant. Meet us at First National Bank of Riverside in 1 hour. And Miss Chen, bring identification. You'll need it to access the box." The drive to Riverside took 90 minutes. Maya spent the entire time staring out the window, watching the landscape change from the familiar woods around Thornwick to the more developed suburbs surrounding Riverside. First National Bank was an old building, built in the 1920s according to the cornerstone. Marble columns, bronze doors, the kind of institution that had weathered the Depression and countless recessions through conservative management and old money. Sarah was waiting outside with 2 other investigators and a lawyer holding a very official-looking document. "The warrant authorizes us to open Safety Deposit Box 173 and inventory its contents. As the legal heir, you have the right to be present." Inside, the bank manager, a nervous man in his 50s, kept apologizing. "We had no idea. The box hasn't been accessed since 1987. The annual fees were paid automatically from an account that's been inactive for decades. We assumed the owner had passed away, but without notification." "It's fine," Sarah said crisply. "Just open the vault." They descended into the basement where the safety deposit boxes were kept. The walls were thick concrete, the door solid steel. The manager used his key and the brass key Maya had found. Box 173 slid out with a metallic whisper. It was larger than Maya expected, maybe 2 feet long, a foot wide, a foot deep. The manager placed it on a table and stepped back. Sarah nodded at Maya. "Go ahead." Maya lifted the lid with trembling hands. Inside were stacks of paper, all neatly organized in labeled folders. She pulled out the first one. Bearer bonds, issued in 1986. Face value, $10 million. Sarah whistled softly. "That's just the first folder." There were 6 more. More bearer bonds, certificates of deposit from banks that probably didn't exist anymore, but the FDIC insurance would still be valid. Stock certificates for companies that had since split and merged and grown exponentially. And at the bottom, a sealed envelope with Maya's name on it. Not Miss Chen, not "to whom it may concern," but Maya Chen Blackwood in Jonathan's careful handwriting. "He knew," Maya whispered. "Somehow, he knew my name." Dorothy's voice was thick with tears. "Caroline must have written to him, must have told him about you before she died. He knew you existed. He knew you'd find this eventually." With shaking hands, Maya opened the envelope. Inside was a letter, handwritten on thick paper that had yellowed slightly with age. "My dearest Maya, If you're reading this, then you've found what I've spent my final days protecting. You've discovered who you are and what you're owed. I'm sorry I never got to meet you. I'm sorry your mother felt she had to run, to hide, to give you up. She did it because she loved you, because she wanted you to have a chance at a normal life, free from the danger that surrounded our family. But I want you to know something important. You are a Blackwood. That name carries weight, history, responsibility. It's not just about money or property or stocks. It's about standing up for what's right, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. The man who forced us into hiding is named Richard Carmichael. By the time you read this, he may be old, he may be powerful, he may seem untouchable, but he's not. He's a thief and a coward. And with the evidence I've left you, you have the power to stop him. Not just for our family, but for all the others he's hurt over the years. I know this is a heavy burden to place on someone so young, but I also know that you're strong. You survived without family, without resources, without anyone to guide you. That strength, that resilience, that's what makes you worthy of the Blackwood name. Use this fortune wisely. Help people, build something good, and never let anyone tell you that you don't deserve it. You are my granddaughter. You are Caroline's daughter. You are a fighter. Make us proud. With all my love, Jonathan Blackwood. Maya couldn't see the words anymore through her tears. Dorothy was crying openly. Even Sarah Chen had to clear her throat and look away. One of the investigators began cataloging the contents of the box. The preliminary estimate, he said, was somewhere between $200 and $250 million. And that was before accounting for stock growth and compound interest over 36 years. We'll need to secure all of this, Sarah said. It's evidence in an ongoing investigation. But Miss Chen, I want you to know, this is yours, legally, morally, ethically, and we're going to make sure you get it. The news broke that evening. Maya was back at Dorothy's house when her phone started exploding with notifications. The headlines were everywhere. Homeless teen discovers $250 million fortune hidden in haunted mansion. Town councilman accused of decades-long fraud scheme. Missing heiress found living in her car. James called. Are you watching the news? I'm trying not to. Don't. It's a circus. But Maya, it's working. The public is on your side. They're calling Carmichael a monster, demanding investigations. 3 more victims have come forward just today. What about him? What's Carmichael saying? James was quiet for a moment. He's denying everything. Says you're a con artist who fabricated evidence. Says the DNA test is fake. Says the journal is forged. His lawyers are filing motions to dismiss, to suppress evidence, to delay proceedings. Will it work? Not a chance. Sarah Chen is a bulldog, and the Attorney General himself has taken an interest. This is high profile. No one wants to be seen protecting a corrupt official. That night, Maya sat with Dorothy in the living room, both of them too wired to sleep. The older woman had made tea that neither of them was drinking. What are you going to do? Dorothy asked. When this is all over, when you have access to the money. Maya had been thinking about that. I'm going to restore Blackwood Manor, make it beautiful again, and then I'm going to turn it into something useful. Like what? A transition home for kids aging out of foster care. A place where they can learn skills, get education, have support, so they don't end up like me, sleeping in cars and wondering if they matter. Dorothy smiled through fresh tears. Your grandfather would love that. And I'm going to set up a fund to help the other victims, the families Carmichael destroyed. They deserve restitution. That's a lot of money. I know, but it's not about the money. It never was. It's about making something good out of something terrible. The preliminary hearing was scheduled for 2 weeks later. In the meantime, Maya's life transformed in ways she couldn't have imagined. James hired a publicist to help manage the media requests. Dorothy's small house became command central. And Maya, who'd spent her entire life invisible, suddenly found herself at the center of a national news story. People magazine wanted an interview. Good Morning America called. A literary agent reached out about book rights. It was overwhelming and surreal, and sometimes Maya had to step outside just to breathe. But through it all, She kept thinking about Jonathan's letter, about responsibility, about fighting for what's right. This wasn't about fame or attention. This was about justice. The day before the hearing, Sarah Chen came to Dorothy's house with an update. "We've frozen all of Carmichael's assets. His lawyers are screaming, but the judge sided with us. We've also identified additional properties and accounts that trace back to Blackwood money. The total estate value is now estimated at $310 million. Maya felt lightheaded. $310 million. And Carmichael's going to fight for every penny. You need to be ready for tomorrow. His lawyers are going to attack your character, your credibility, your motives. They're going to try to make you look like a gold digger who fabricated everything." "Let them," Maya said. "I know who I am." The courthouse was surrounded by media when they arrived the next morning. Cameras everywhere, reporters shouting questions. James and Dorothy flanked Maya as they pushed through the crowd. Inside, the courtroom was packed. Maya saw faces she recognized from Thornwick, some supportive, some skeptical. And there, at the defendant's table, sat Richard Carmichael. He looked older than he had that night at the Manor, tired, but still defiant. Their eyes met across the room. He didn't look away. Neither did she. The judge, a woman in her 60s named Patricia Hawthorne, called the room to order. "We're here today for a preliminary hearing in the matter of Chen versus Carmichael regarding the Blackwood estate. This is not a trial. This is to determine whether there's sufficient evidence to proceed. Let's begin." The next 4 hours were brutal. Carmichael's lawyers presented their case first. They argued that Maya had no legitimate claim, that the DNA evidence was circumstantial, that the documents could have been forged, that she was an opportunist who'd heard about the Blackwood legend and created an elaborate fraud. Maya sat through it all, her jaw clenched, her hands folded in her lap. When they showed photos of her sleeping in her car, presented her spotty work history, questioned her intelligence and education, she didn't flinch. Let them try to shame her for being poor, for surviving. She wasn't ashamed. Then it was their turn. James presented the DNA evidence, walking the judge through the chain of custody, the lab certifications, the statistical probability. Then he presented Jonathan's journal, reading excerpts that detailed Carmichael's fraud with painful specificity. Then he brought Dorothy to the stand. She testified about working for the Blackwood family, about the day Jonathan told her to leave, about recognizing Maya as Caroline's daughter. Her voice shook, but her testimony was clear and credible. Finally, Sarah Chen took the stand as an expert witness. She presented the findings from the Attorney General's investigation. The pattern of fraud, the manipulation of county records, the dozens of victims, the systematic theft that had enriched Carmichael while devastating families. When she finished, Judge Hawthorne looked at Carmichael. "Does the defendant wish to testify?" His lawyers conferred. Then Carmichael stood. "Yes, Your Honor." He took the stand with the confidence of someone who'd never been held accountable for anything. "Your Honor, I've served this county for 40 years. I've created jobs, invested in infrastructure, helped families. The Blackwood estate was abandoned, legally abandoned. I managed those assets in accordance with state law. If I profited, it was because I took risks, made investments, created value where there was none." "And the 47 families who lost their homes?" James asked during cross-examination. "Did you create value for them too?" "Those were legitimate foreclosures. Manipulated by you, using insider knowledge and political connections. That's speculation." James held up a document. "This is a memo from you to the county tax assessor dated March 2nd, 2003. You're requesting that the assessed value of the Henderson property be raised by 40%. Knowing the family was already struggling to pay. 2 months later, they defaulted. 3 months after that, you purchased the property through a shell company for half its market value. Is that creating value, Mr. Carmichael, or is that theft?" Carmichael's facade cracked slightly. "I followed the law." "You manipulated it, and you did it for 36 years. By the end of the day, Judge Hawthorne had heard enough. "I've reviewed the evidence presented today. The DNA analysis proving Miss Chen's maternity to Caroline Blackwood, the journal documenting systematic fraud, The safety deposit box contents confirming hidden assets, the testimony from multiple witnesses, and the pattern of behavior documented by the Attorney General's office. She looked at Carmichael. I find sufficient evidence to proceed to trial. Moreover, I'm granting the plaintiff's motion to maintain the freeze on all assets pending resolution. Mr. Carmichael, you are hereby barred from transferring, selling, or otherwise disposing of any property or funds connected to the Blackwood estate. Carmichael's lawyer shot to his feet. Your Honor, that's my ruling. Court adjourned. The gavel came down like thunder. Outside the courthouse, the media descended again, but this time, Maya was ready. She stood on the steps, James on one side, Dorothy on the other, and faced the cameras. My name is Maya Chen Blackwood, she said clearly. I'm 19 years old. I grew up in foster care. I aged out of the system with nothing. For the last year, I've been homeless, living in my car, working odd jobs to survive. 2 weeks ago, I bought an abandoned mansion for $275. I thought I was buying shelter. What I actually bought was my family's stolen legacy. She paused, letting that sink in. Richard Carmichael spent 36 years stealing from my family and from dozens of others. He used his power and connections to destroy lives while enriching himself. But he made one mistake. He underestimated a homeless girl with nothing to lose and everything to fight for. The cameras flashed. Reporters shouted questions. Maya ignored them all. This isn't about me getting rich. This is about justice. For my grandfather, who died protecting evidence he hoped someone would find. For my mother, who died alone because she was running from a powerful man. For every family Carmichael destroyed. We're not backing down. We're not settling. We're seeing this through to the end. She turned and walked away, leaving the reporters in her wake. The trial itself took 3 months. 3 months of testimony, evidence, expert witnesses. 3 months of Carmichael's lawyers trying every trick, every delay, every legal maneuver they could think of. But Sarah Chen and her team were relentless. They brought forward victim after victim. They showed the paper trail of fraud stretching back decades. They proved, beyond any doubt, that Richard Carmichael had built his fortune on theft. During those 3 months, Maya's life settled into a strange new rhythm. She moved out of Dorothy's guest room and into a small apartment that James helped her lease. Nothing fancy, just a studio with a kitchen and a bathroom that actually worked. It was the first place she'd ever lived that was truly hers. She got a job at a local law firm, filing paperwork and answering phones. The pay wasn't great, but it was honest work, and it kept her busy during the long days between court appearances. Her co-workers knew who she was, of course. Everyone did. But they treated her normally, which she appreciated more than they'd ever know. In the evenings, she'd visit Dorothy, and they'd go over the next day's testimony. On weekends, she'd drive out to Blackwood Manor and walk the property, making plans. The house was still legally in limbo, but Sarah had assured her it would be returned once the trial concluded. Maya spent hours sketching layouts, researching programs for foster youth, dreaming about what the manor could become. She also started attending a support group for former foster kids. Sitting in a circle of folding chairs in a church basement, listening to stories that mirrored her own, she realized how many people were fighting battles just like hers. Not against millionaire fraudsters, maybe, but against systems that had failed them, against odds that seemed impossible. One night, a girl about Maya's age shared her story. She'd aged out at 18, spent 2 years homeless, and was now working 3 jobs to afford community college. Some days, she said, her voice breaking, I'm so tired I can't see straight. But I keep going because I want to prove that we're not statistics. We're survivors. The room erupted in applause. Maya found herself clapping harder than anyone, tears streaming down her face. After the meeting, she approached the girl. I'm Maya, she said. I know who you are, the girl replied. Everyone does. What's your name? Tasha. Maya pulled out one of the business cards James had made for her. When this is all over, when I have access to the money, I'm starting a foundation. Scholarships, housing assistance, job training. I'd like you to help me run it, if you're interested. Tasha stared at the card, then at Maya. You're serious? Completely. You know what these kids need because you've lived it. That's worth more than any degree. Tasha's hands shook as she took the card. I don't know what to say. Say you'll think about it. By the time the trial reached its final week, the prosecution had built an airtight case. The evidence was overwhelming. The testimonies were devastating. Even Carmichael's own lawyers seemed resigned to defeat. The jury deliberated for 4 hours. When they returned, their verdict was unanimous. Guilty on all counts: fraud, embezzlement, conspiracy. Carmichael was sentenced to 23 years in federal prison. He'd be 93 when he got out, if he lived that long. Maya watched him being led away in handcuffs, and she felt no triumph, no joy, just a quiet sense of completion. Justice hadn't brought her family back. It hadn't erased the years of loneliness and struggle, but it had honored their memory. And that was enough. The civil case was settled shortly after. The Blackwood estate, valued at $310 million after decades of growth, was awarded in full to Maya Chen Blackwood. Carmichael's personal assets, everything he'd bought with stolen money, were liquidated and distributed among his victims. On a warm day in May, 6 months after she'd first walked through the doors of Blackwood Manor, Maya stood on the front steps once again. But this time, she wasn't alone. Contractors worked inside, restoring plaster, refinishing floors, bringing the house back to life. Dorothy supervised, clipboard in hand, barking orders like she'd never stopped being the housekeeper. James stood beside Maya, now officially her attorney and friend. The foundation paperwork is filed. The Blackwood Legacy Fund is operational. We've already distributed $5 million to Carmichael's victims, and the manor renovation should be complete by fall. Maya looked up at the house. Someone had cleaned the windows, and afternoon light poured through them, making the whole building glow. How many kids can we house here? The way we've designed it? 20 at a time, with space for education programs, job training, counseling services. We've got funding for at least 10 years, probably more if we're smart with investments. And the scholarship program? Fully funded. We'll be able to send 50 kids to college every year. Full ride. Books, housing, everything. Maya felt tears prick her eyes. My grandfather would love this. He'd love you, Dorothy said, joining them on the steps. You took something broken and made it beautiful. That's exactly what he hoped for. That night, Maya walked through the manor alone. The contractors had gone home. The house was quiet, but it wasn't the oppressive silence she'd found that first day. It was peaceful, expectant, like it was waiting for laughter and life to fill its rooms again. She ended up in the library, in the hidden room that had changed everything. Someone had cleaned it, organized it, turned it into a small museum documenting the Blackwood family history. Jonathan's journal sat in a glass case, opened to his final entry. The letter to Maya was framed on the wall. She stood in front of it, reading his words for the 100th time. You are a fighter. Make us proud. I'm trying, she whispered. I'm really trying. Her phone buzzed, a text from one of the social workers she'd been coordinating with. We have our first resident ready, 16-year-old girl, aged out of foster care last month, sleeping in her car. Can we bring her tomorrow? Maya typed back immediately. Yes, absolutely yes. She looked around the room one more time, at the filing cabinets that had held so many secrets, at the desk where Jonathan had planned his final act of defiance, at the walls that had protected the truth for 36 years until the right person came along to claim it. Some people would say she'd been lucky, that she'd stumbled into fortune by accident. But Maya knew better. She'd been exactly where she needed to be, when she needed to be there, and she'd been brave enough to fight when fighting seemed impossible. The next morning, Maya stood on the front steps of Blackwood Manor as a social worker's car pulled up. A teenage girl climbed out, clutching a garbage bag that probably held everything she owned. She looked up at the mansion with wide eyes, scared and hopeful at the same time. Maya walked down to meet her. Hi, I'm Maya. I'm Jessica, the girl said quietly. "Welcome home, Jessica." Maya put her arm around her shoulders and led her inside. Through the grand entrance hall, past the sweeping staircase, into a house that was no longer haunted by ghosts, but filled with possibility. Over the next few weeks, more kids arrived, each one carrying their own story of loss and survival, each one looking at Blackwood Manor like they couldn't quite believe it was real. Maya met them all personally, showed them to their rooms, sat with them at dinner, listened to their fears and dreams. Tasha had accepted Maya's offer and became the program director. Together, they built something revolutionary. Not just housing, but healing. Not just shelter, but structure. Classes in the morning, job training in the afternoon, therapy sessions, life skills workshops, college prep. The local community college partnered with them to offer courses on site. A nearby restaurant hired 3 of their residents. The county library started a weekly book club in the Manor's restored library. Slowly, the house that had been a symbol of loss became a symbol of hope. On the 1-year anniversary of buying the Manor, Maya held a celebration. Former victims of Carmichael's fraud came. Journalists who'd covered the trial came. Kids from the support group came. The lawn was filled with people laughing, eating, celebrating not just Maya's victory, but the victory of truth over corruption. Ed Milton, the hardware store owner who'd given her work when no one else would, pulled her aside. "I'm proud of you, kid. You could have taken that money and disappeared, lived easy, but you stayed, you fought, you built something that matters." Maya hugged him tight. "You helped me survive when I had nothing. I won't forget that." As the sun set and the party continued, Maya found herself back in the tower room where she'd slept that first night. The view was the same. The forest, the gardens, the fountain that now worked again, water sparkling in the fading light. But everything else had changed. She pulled out her phone and opened the photo album she'd created. Pictures of Jessica laughing with other residents. Tasha presenting at a foster care reform conference. Dorothy cutting the ribbon at the Manor's official opening. James celebrating his promotion to partner at his law firm, thanks in part to the publicity from the case. And one photo she'd found in the hidden room, Jonathan and Caroline standing together on these same steps, both smiling at a camera held by someone long gone. Maya set the phone down and looked out at the property. Her property, her legacy, her purpose. Because Maya Chen Blackwood, the homeless girl who'd bought a cursed mansion for $275, had learned something important. Sometimes the most valuable things in life aren't found in safety deposit boxes or stock portfolios. They're found in the courage to stand up when you've been knocked down, in the strength to fight when the odds are impossible, in the faith that justice matters, even when the system seems rigged against you. She'd started with nothing and discovered everything. Not just wealth, but purpose. Not just family history, but family future. Not just a house, but a home for all the lost kids who needed to know they mattered. And that, Maya thought as she watched the lights come on throughout the Manor, as she heard laughter echoing through halls that had been silent for too long, was worth more than $310 million could ever buy. Anyone can change the world if they're brave enough to claim what's theirs and generous enough to share it with those who need it most. As the sun set over Blackwood Manor, casting golden light across its restored stone walls, Maya Chen Blackwood didn't reach for a wrench or count her money. She reached for the hand of a frightened girl who reminded her of herself not so long ago, and together they walked into a house that had finally become what it was always meant to be. Not a monument to the past, but a bridge to the future. Because for Maya, and for every homeless kid who would follow her through those doors, the haunted house wasn't haunted anymore. It was hope made solid. It was proof that sometimes the girl everyone overlooks becomes the woman nobody can ignore. And it was just the beginning. The end. Up next, 2 more powerful stories that will move you. Click now to keep discovering with us. And don't forget to hit subscribe if you believe that justice is always worth fighting for.